me to introduce you?
Sure.
We all know Seth.
We all know Seth. Seth, often known as Gabbai to Rabbi Zalman of blessed memory, teacher, scholar, man of great respect in our congregation. We very much look forward to hearing what you have to tell us tonight on Teshuva and social justice.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So I actually put together a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to share. Let me just find it. Here we go. And let me just make that full screen here. Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. The idea for this talk came in a discussion that we had in the early planning days of these 30 meaningful minutes. And I don't remember who it was, but we were having a discussion and it seemed like there was this notion, somebody was saying that, well, I don't really daven very much, but you know, get me a phone and I'll get people out to vote. That's really important to me. And then other people were like, well, my spiritual life is important to me. And I was sitting in that conversation and I was thinking, for me, there's no difference between my spiritual life and my social action life. So maybe that'd be a good thing to talk about at Beth El. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off or not. I just realized I have audio. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and I'm going to share again and make sure I've got my audio enabled here. Okay, share computer sound. Okay, there we go. This thing here. Okay. And I dedicated this to the memory of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Olav Shalom, who represents social action to the nth degree as far as I'm concerned, which in my world would also mean that she's very spiritual. But all right, so first of all, we'll start with a nigun that is that was written by Shlomo Carlebach using this text, which is from this time of year. Hashivenu Hashem Alecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Take us back, O Lord, to yourself, and let us come back, renew our days of old. And this has the word Hashivenu, which comes from the same root, and also Nashuva. They come from the same root as Teshuva. It means to return. We usually translate the word as repentance, but literally from the Hebrew, it has to do with the idea of returning. You could say returning to a purer self, returning to a better self, returning to a younger self, perhaps. And the text comes from the Book of Lamentations, which we read on Tisha B'Av. So on Tisha B'Av, this book ends with this text. It's a very low point in the Jewish calendar. On Tisha B'Av, we're mourning the destruction of the Holy Temple. We're looking forward to the season that we're right in the middle of right now, the 10 days of awe, the season of repentance, the month of Elul, and the whole theme of this time is one of Teshuva. Now this song was taken by my teacher, Reb Zalman, and he sings it to the same melody, but he does it to illustrate something called the four worlds. So we're going to look, in a second, we're going to look at the four worlds. Now, Reb Zalman, so I guess let me go to that slide first. So this is a picture of the whole cosmos in a sense. On the top here, you have the light of Ein Sof, which is the light of pure divinity, where before creation, all that existed was the pure light of God. It's also called Keter, which is the crown. And at some point, God decided to create a world, to create a universe, and that the worlds were rolled out I mean, some would say in order. I mean, the Big Bang is also another way to describe the creation of the universe. And these letters are mapped because person is made in God's image. So the letters of the divine name are mapped to the worlds. And when we pray, we're talking about these worlds. Now, Kabbalists use this imagery to try to get closer to God. And ultimately, the connection, the theology that we have, the way that we understand God, what do we understand that word to mean, is related to our spiritual life. So that's sort of where I'm heading in terms of trying to bring together Tikkun Olam and spirituality. But I wanted to just share Reb Zalman's version of Reb Shlomo's Niggin. And so you'll hear a little bit of it. Unfortunately, I cut off the beginning, so it starts in the middle. Whoops.
Lord, I want to feel for you. Lord, I want to know for you. Lord, I want to be for you. Oh, Lord, I want to do for you. Lord, I want to feel for you. Lord, I want to know for you. Lord, I want to be for you. You are action, your feeling, your knowledge. You are being, you are action, you are feeling, your knowledge, you just are. Lord, I want to do for you. Lord, I want to feel for you. Lord, I want to know for you. Lord, I want to be for you.
So there are four dimensions that we live in. There are four dimensions that we live in. The world of action is one. That's where we go out and accomplish things. We move things around. We interface with it in an I-it relationship. There's the world of feelings, where we can see a little bit about what people are feeling, but in a way that world is invisible to us. There are people who can be angry and hide it. We can't really see the world of feelings. There's the world of knowledge, the world of thoughts, and then there's the world of being. And so this ties into this understanding of God. So if we look at this picture and we connect it to the different worlds that we live in the world of action, which is also equated with the final hey of the divine name. We live in the world of feelings, which is equated to the vav. We live in the world of thought, which is equated to the upper hey. and then we live in the world of being, the world of existence, which is equated to the Yud. Now, here I wanted to just take you through some assumptions that I bring to the table in my understanding about Yiddishkeit. First of all, that there is a synergy that exists between social action and spirit, between spirit and social action. That when I am engaging in spiritual activities, then I am also nurturing that part of me which is going to go out and do good in the world, that is going to pursue justice. When I pursue justice, it is having an impact on that part of my life which is related to my spirit. Second, that Judaism embraces pluralism, divergent ideas, and opinions. There is nothing that the Torah says that would indicate that there's only one way of being Jewish. Yes, there might be a community that says that the only way to be Jewish is to follow the Shulchan Aruch, or that that there's good Jews and bad Jews, or the Reform community might say if you're not having meaningful discussions about ethics and justice, then you're not a good Jew. I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of diversity in Klal Yisrael, but it's not necessarily filled with Ahavat Yisrael. So we have to work really hard to bring the love of Israel. But I am completely convinced that divergent ideas and diversity is part of Yiddishkeit. And I remember my grandparents, Olav Shalom, that they were Orthodox, but they were never telling us that we were, bad Jews or something like that. Adonai Tzvaot is usually translated as the Lord of Hosts, meaning like myriad armies, but it can also be translated as God of diversity. We may not believe the same thing or think the same way, and that makes us richer as long as we can, we can be civil with one another and learn how to listen to one another. And also there's this assumption that there's a Jewish credo that we all subscribe to, and if someone doesn't subscribe to it, they're not Jewish. And I just don't believe that. I think there are as many credos perhaps in Yiddishkeit as there are Jews, and I would be interested to hear each person's credo. And then finally, this time of year is one of Binyan HaMalchut, establishing God's realm, which we usually think of the way to do that is through Teshuva, Tefillah, Tzedakah, that Teshuva, repentance, Tefillah, prayer, Tzedakah, charity, or we could also say increased awareness, nurturing spirit, and pursuing justice. So really my whole thesis is based on the idea that the Jewish God encompasses so many different parts of our being that if we want to try to bring a unity and a peace between them, then we can get to a place where we recognize that our sense of right and wrong, our sense of justice, and our spiritual life are one and the same. The only barrier to that is that people, they look at the physical universe and what they understand from science, and they can't imagine a place where God exists in that universe. So they decide that they're going to turn away from the spiritual matters. But the reality is that if you understand God to be aligned with your deepest beliefs, with your credo, with your way of going about your life, if you can just accept the fact that your perspective is so valid in the universe, in the world, that God is interested in you and interested in your perspective, then perhaps you can start to grow in your spiritual life. And then for my final slide, I have, the theme of this talk, which is getting better at this time of year. In other words, to turn over a new leaf, to try to move forward. And I have a very spiritual piece to illustrate this.
I've got to admit, it's getting better. Getting so much better all the time. It's getting better all the time. It's getting better all the time.
All right. Well, anyway, that's I don't know if it was 30 minutes. I might not have filled up the whole 30 minutes. But we could have a conversation now if anybody has any thoughts or questions, but that's what I prepared. Otherwise, I'll just give you back 10 minutes.
You got 30 minutes is wonderful stuff and only 20. It's a real miracle. It was very fulfilling, Seth.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
It was beautiful. So Seth, what is your credo?
Oh my God.
This is putting you on the spot, I know.
Wow. Well, I mean, my credo is definitely connected to diversity. There's no question about it. You know, when I was growing up, I didn't believe in that. I used to think there was the Jewish kids and the Italian kids. And my kids going to school in Pennsbury really took home the message of diversity. I mean, having Obama as president for 8 years, we had a lot of growth of diversity. But I remember in the workforce, you know, I used to only work with Americans when I first started working. And now there's hardly any Americans. I'm working with people from India. I'm working with people from the Philippines, all over. You know, to pronounce the names is a challenge. And I really believe that if we can learn to for any problem to allow in the voices that are different than ours, and to get past, you know, if we have an immediate knee-jerk reaction, to get past that and try to understand one another, that's a really core part of my credo for sure. God of diversity.
That's beautiful.
What else can you say?
I know, I mean, that was beautiful.
Maybe you could talk a little bit though. It seems to me though there's sort of a misunderstanding in the Jewish world, because we are very diverse, pluralistic, misunderstanding of what Tikkun Olam means. And sometimes I get the feeling in the Reform movement, it's become a principle that's almost falsely worshipped in place of other ritual and tenets of Jewish life. And it's sort of like in your search for meaning and belonging and identifying, it becomes like a cause that's worshipped. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Sure.
So I thought maybe you could talk about the root of what Tikkun Olam is supposed to be about, and how it's, to sound less judgmental, because I'm trying to change, how it's interpreted differently in the communities. How about that? That's a little more open.
Well, I'm not a spokesperson for any of these communities. My understanding is that the word tikkun means to repair. There is this Kabbalistic notion that from the beginning that there was a perfect world that was created, that you could say a world of tikkun that was created, and then there was a world of tohu that was created where everything was separate and isolated. And there's this idea that the light of God came in, and it was too strong for the vessels, so the vessels shattered and the sparks were distributed throughout creation. Now, I'm not sure if the Reform movement is going to all of that Kabbalistic stuff, but just really, I think that as I understand it, Tikkun Olam is usually used as a synonym for justice, for pursuing justice, for ethics, for morals, I think what you're describing is really that one community's way of doing avoda doesn't feel right to another community. That if you go to a Reform service you might feel like they're not davening, or they're not worshiping God in a way that feels right to you. So we have a lot of diversity in terms of what people want when they go to shul. And that's why we have so many different synagogues. But I think we all line up on the idea that there should be justice in the world. Of course, we disagree
On what
about
that means,
about
what
what
that
that
means and how
means.
you achieve it. But I got the feeling that in the narrowest sense, like in the Orthodox world, Tikkun Olam meant, like you say, perfecting the world. And it was supposed to be through, you know, the adherence to Torah and the
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
613 mitzvot. They take it very literally. So they
there's
don't
a
take it as like bail reform in New York City, you know, like they would bristle at the notion of like this almost militaristic, you have to buy into the liberal agenda or you're not espousing Tikkun Olam. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, I do. There's actually a line in the Aleinu, you can look for it. It says, L'takein olam b'malchut shaddai. It's in the second verse of the Aleinu. So we say Aleinu, we sing Aleinu together, and then we come back at the end by Yom Hahu Yed Echad U'Shmo Echad. But the line is L'takein olam b'malchut shaddai, that the world will be fixed with the L'takein olam b'malchut shaddai, with the kingship of God that is going to come in. And that's also part of this time of year with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, of building the constructing the kingdom, if you will. But what is meant by constructing the kingdom? I mean, you're going to get so many different points of view.
Exactly.
Some people are going to say, I'm not even going to touch it because you're talking about a king. I live in America. Don't tell me about a king. Other people are going to say, God is the king, you know, and I worship God. But what do they mean by God? And are they talking about the 613 mitzvot, which we all acknowledge that half of them we can't do anyway because there's no temple, and the
No
other ones,
sacrifices.
you know,
Yeah.
come from another era. So there's all kinds of opinions about that. But the main thing is that people are comfortable with different kinds of communities and different ways of worshiping. Yeah, Judy.
If I may just say, so Tikkun Olam is repairing the world, and as Seth has beautifully said, there are many different ways that we approach repairing the world, and one is not better or worse than another. They're all necessary, just like when we chant on the high holidays and tefillah and teshuva and tzedakah, we need all three components to be able to, you know, participate in enhancing our lives and enhancing our world, but also just not to have a false understanding. I don't know if you're familiar, for example, with JRA. JRA in Northeast Philadelphia was started by Lubavitch. There is a Lubavitch rabbi who coordinates it for years already there, and people of all streams of Judaism and all congregations participate in JRA and go monthly and deliver packages of non-perishable food to people who are at risk in the greater Philadelphia community. So I would not walk away with the understanding that different streams are only doing different certain things and not other things. I think across the board there are other Orthodox
Of course,
that are
do
participating
philanthropy, charity.
ways in Tikkun Olam and in different forms of service. So I think particularly in this last generation, in this last 25, 30 years or so, the reform movement and the reconstructionist movement have sought to access ways to spark their communities, just as we have sought to find ways to spark our communities. And social action is a very tangible way. I can even just say, as a Jewish educator, and I've been a Jewish educator for probably the 25, 30 years or so, many, all different grades and projects, and taught about midot, our Jewish values. And what I can say is my experience has really been that when I work on projects, social action projects with the kids, particularly B'nai Mitzvah age kids, it's something really tangible that they can understand and appreciate and have kind of a hook to get very excited. So whether it's a kid who wants to rescue dogs in a kill shelter, or it's a kid who, you know, loves their bubby in the nursing home and wants to volunteer time in a nursing home. Whatever the projects are, it's a very tangible way to access doing Jewishly, living Jewishly, and liturgy is not always so accessible to kids or to adults. So I think all of these channels are vitally important, and all of these channels are participated in from all the streams. So
I think that's a really good point, that it's something tangible that people can put their hands around and feel good about being Jewish and putting Jewish values into action. And from where I moved from in the greater Washington area, still feels recent, Mitzvah Day of Federation was like the biggest event and the biggest way of getting people involved in Federation. So, and think about 30 years ago, there was no such thing as a bar mitzvah project, bar bat mitzvah project. Now it's the mainstream, right?
right.
But I guess the most exciting, it might be interesting to hear from everybody what kind of projects you were involved in or are involved in your life that was like the big pull for you. I would say the whole Soviet Jewry movement in North America. And I can remember at Jewish camps, and then, you know, when Gorbachev was visiting with Reagan in the White House and going down on the Washington Mall, and hundreds of thousands of Jews of every persuasion, which was cool. We were unified. That was probably one of the highlights of my life. It was just so profound.
I was there.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we tell our children, and my daughter was just an infant, you know, and I remind her about it. And
So unfortunately for me, when I was a kid, I decided that I couldn't integrate my social action life with my Jewish life. I felt that Judaism was against the things that I believed in. And it was only later that I met my teacher, and I was really suffering for not being able to find a way to do it Jewish. So, and I think my daughter has that to some degree too, because she has this notion that I want to speak for her, especially with my wife on the phone, but
Yes, I
she
think you
has,
should. I think that would be fair.
let's
she
beam
has,
her in. Let's beam her in.
she has this notion that, you know, Beth El would not be happy with her opinions about the way that Israel treats the Palestinians. And so
I don't think you should speak for her. You're right.
This is
I'm
great.
just giving an example. So I wish for her that she would feel that she could bring her feelings to Bethel or to any synagogue, and that they would, you know, respect this God of diversity and take her in as a Jewish soul. And I think there's many Jewish souls out there who feel the same way, that they have points of view that maybe would be unpopular in a Jewish circle. And it's a shame that they're not in synagogue. You know, there's the old story about the people in the concentration camp or whatever, and the rabbi and the atheists are having a debate about whether God exists. And somebody comes and says, it's time to daven. And the atheist and the rabbi go together to daven. So, you know, that's, to me, the red diaper babies, you know, was when I was 12 years old, my uncle who was a red diaper baby took me and my cousin to a meeting of the Communist Party.
Wow.
I mean, you know, that was my background. I grew up in Brooklyn, and they lived in a public housing project, and that was their thing.
Well, I found all your comments very enlightening, things to give some thought to. But I was also curious, you mentioned you work with different people, and I'm curious what kind of work you do.
I work for Pico, the electric company. And so I work in the computer department. I've been a programmer now for 40 years. I'm looking to retire possibly next June in Yirtzeh Hashem. We'll see if it really happens. So that's what I do.
And what kind of people do you work for that you were saying about the diversity?
What's that, Anna?
I think he was asking about the people that you work for that you alluded to that about.
Oh, yeah, no, well, that's it. So it's all computer programmers. There used to all be American. And then I remember in 2007, I had my first Indian contractor. Her name was Ramana Sequeira. She happened to be a Catholic Indian, which is rare. And she lived in Chicago, which is where my company is headquartered. But now they live in their home countries, and we have 24/7. I get emails all around the clock. I don't have to answer them, but people are in all different time zones. It's a totally different workplace.
So that mix of people really affects you.
Yeah, it does. But I'm very careful to respect diversity. It's been difficult. There was for 4 years or so, I was working in a group where I was the only American. The manager was from India. My supervisor was from India. All the people were from India. There was me and a girl from Russia. And that was the group I worked in. And I was on a team where I felt like they were shutting me out. They were trying to keep everything for the Indian people and all this thing. But I had to just be patient and learn to work with it and not lose my temper or whatever. And eventually I made a place for myself, just like in any situation. It wasn't a question of they were shutting me out. It was just a question of cultural differences that we had to learn to work together, really.
Interesting, yeah.
Oh, phones or computers are
Was that
doing
the
that.
year that Rebecca was in India?
I don't think it was connected to that. It was when I was working with Sri Lakshmi and Sridhar all the time. I was working with Sridhar and Sri Lakshmi. They were my co-workers that I worked with.
But it's also interesting. It's diversity of cultures, but even just within the American population, diversity of viewpoints. And I think we've lost the ability, like what your daughter was perhaps concerned about, is that we can have different points of view, but still be willing to listen to each other, see where people are coming from, say things respectfully. And I think we can all grow that way. It's not about changing someone's opinion. It's just about understanding, kind of.
That's
And
beautiful.
I think Beth El, from what I've gleaned, does seem to be a very welcoming, diverse, and I guess accepting, tolerant community where you could have an Israel forum, I think, and hear different points of view on very sensitive topics. And as long as it was said with respect, I think no one would get like kicked out of the building. I mean, if someone said, I'm exaggerating, but I hate Israel, I hate Israelis, they're horrible to the Palestinians, yeah, you're not going to get heard. But if you say it eloquently and you maybe have some examples, facts, and constructive, what you'd like to see happen, and also cite some positive stuff, I think you'd be heard. But
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a great community.
said from an APACer who was dumb enough to go to the 18,000 person policy conference between March, I was there
Listen,
March
what
2nd
did
and 3rd, and then I was cowering in fear of
What
Corona.
did we know? What did we know in the beginning, those first couple of weeks? Anna and I were in a chorus rehearsal the same night that there was a chorus in Oregon where 60% of the people or something got infected that night just from being in a chorus rehearsal.
I was worried and I stood away from everybody else.
Yeah. I kind of knew. I will tell you something funny though. Lou was there and he comes up to me and he's like, Lou from our company, he wants to like shake my hand and shoes. I'm like, I'm not shaking your hands. Corona. He goes, oh, you are so neurotic. You are so OCD.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I was like,
He was one of the first Lou was one of the first people tested in
I
Bucks
know.
County.
And I had my
After APAC.
Purell. I was Purelling. I wouldn't eat the food. I was like getting in a box to go. And I go up the escalator, Purell, down the escalator, Purell. I refused to shake hands. I went to, they had like a expo where you go to the different booths and, you know, they sell you on all the Israeli innovations. So Hatzolah of Israel was there, you know, the ambulance thing. And they're trying to fundraise. And I don't know, they like want me to shake their hand. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm just, you know, look at all these jumbotrons ahead that are telling you not to shake hands, not to do this, not to do that. I'm following it. Do you know, like several months later, they fundraised me. And I said to the guy, I was at the APAC conference and I refused to shake hands. And I met with somebody who goes, I remember you. You were like the only one that wouldn't shake our hand.
And it's so surprising they wanted to shake hands because Hatzalah tends to be Orthodox. So,
Well, actually, it was the woman. It was this woman, Miriam, that's the New Jersey liaison, who wanted to
that
shake my
explains
hand.
it. That's why she wanted to shake your
I
hand.
know what synagogue I was in to hit you all up, but anyway.
Well, good
Yeah.
for you. You know, my wife also is she spent a lifetime of being very careful about things. She used to work for environmental protection and so when this pandemic hit, I was with a good partner there who protected me because I'm very laissez-faire, you know, kind of not so careful.
Mm-hmm.
Can I share a quick story related to what Mary was saying earlier?
Sure, of course.
So Mary, you were saying in the days of, you know, bar and bat mitzvahs becoming, having themes, and supporting Soviet Jewry was one of the themes. And I remember as a kid marching at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza by the UN to free the Soviet Jews and free the Soviet dissidents. And years later, living here, Natan Sharansky came to speak at an event in Philadelphia, and I went to the event and I enjoyed the event, whatever, but I got his book and I was online to have him sign the book. And when it was my turn to have him sign the book, I said to him, you know, I am so excited to see you here. I need to let you know I am one of those people who was always in front of the UN marching for you, you know, for the dissidents to be freed. So that was kind of a cool experience.
That's amazing. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And it was really cool to probably here in Philadelphia, you had it too. Maybe I had a little more in Washington, where the children of these refuseniks the refuseniks were finally let out and some came to Washington, D.C. And my children were in day school with their children. And it was, some of them are active in the community. You know, they stayed Jewish and it worked. And it's a nice circle. So.
Thank you, Seth.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Seth. This was beautiful.
See you in the morning.
Getting to know you is very nice. Thank you.
Erev Tov.
Thank you.